Hi, and welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. I really sincerely wish that we didn't have to gather tonight to talk about strategies for coping with stress, but life is full of all kinds of stresses. We'll talk about what those are, and that being just a reality of what it's like to live in the world. Let's see if we can find some ways to make that a little bit easier and a little bit more manageable. So we'll start out, just take a quick temperature of how much stress you feel at the moment. So on a scale of 1, light as a feather, not feeling any stress at all, 10, pinned all the way to the red, what do you feel in terms of your stress at the moment? And notice where you go to check in when I ask you that question. So, do you check how your belly feels? Do you check how your heart rate feels? Do you check how your thoughts feel? Where do you go to find out how much stress you're feeling? And now I'll ask you to think about a particular thing that you're experiencing in your life that feels stressful. Chances are, if you signed up to join us today, there's something in your life that makes you feel stress. So rather than thinking generically about being a parent is stressful or work is stressful, think about that one thing that causes you stress, that circumstance, that place, that person. And as you call that to mind, do you notice that stress meter going up at all? Where in your body do you notice that as you call up that person, place, or thing, that experience that causes you stress? And if you noticed that thinking about the thing that causes you stress made that stress meter go up, that means we can also make the stress meter go down because we have a little bit of control about what's going on internally if we don't always control what's going on externally. Andrea already gave me a little introduction, but just real briefly, I'm a trained, experienced, certified coach. I'm a Michigan MBA. I'm also a girl who has learned personally some ways to deal with stress because I think, I'm sort of a recovering type A. I spent a lot of my life sort of perpetually stewing in stress. I started out as a daily newspaper reporter. Those daily deadlines were really stressful. So I'm trained as a coach. I also try very hard to practice what I preach. As we're settling in, just some sort of housekeeping recommendations on how to get the most from this session. If you can, turn off the phone, your notifications, your Slack, everything's going to ding, bong, pop up so that you can give yourself the really delicious experience of monotasking and making this time be just for you. If you can, I invite you to participate in the full session. We'll cover a variety of things that might build on each other as we go. I know that life can be complicated though, and so you will get a recording. So if you have to drop off, you can come back and pick back up on what you missed. I see several of you have already turned off your camera. That's fine. If it's easier for you to be off camera and focus more on your experience than worrying about fixing your face, that's great. I invite you to use the chat to ask questions. to talk amongst yourselves, really participate. I would just ask you to not do that while we're doing a few of the exercises that we'll practice, so that you can really focus on the experience you're having, and we don't take anybody else out of theirs. Okay, so let's dive in. So first, let's start with a little bit of vocabulary. I feel like these words, stress and anxiety, get tossed around as though they're interchangeable, and they're really not. So stress in general is our response to something happening external. So you argue with a friend, you're under deadline on a big project, something's going on out there, and our nervous system gets activated. And stress typically goes away once the situation is resolved. We'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on, but stress can come from both positive and negative circumstances. But again, it's from external circumstances. Anxiety tends to be more constant. So it doesn't resolve and dissipate when there's nothing going on to cause stress. And so I wanted to make that distinction because today we're going to focus more on the left. We're going to focus on our response to circumstances that we're experiencing and how we respond to them. And we'll just ask again that if you can mute yourself, that'll help to keep the background noise down. So what causes stress? It can come from both positive and negative events. It can come from things happening in your immediate life, your personal life, things like a death of a family or friend, losing your job. Can also come from positive things like getting a promotion, getting married, moving into a better house. It can come from circumstances in the wider world. So we can get stressed by politics, inflation, what's going on in the industry, discrimination, climate change, whatever is like causing your nervous system to feel like there's something I need to respond to. And it's often either a threat or a change. Our nervous system can respond to change as, ooh, is this threatening? Is this a danger? I need to figure it out. So lots of things can cause us to have a stress response, big and small, positive and negative. I asked you at the top of the call to notice where you go to check where you are on that stress meter. Stress can play out in lots of ways. It can be physically in your body. It can be your mood. It can be how you behave. And knowing what your personal stress reactions are can be really helpful. So you sort of know that canary in the coal mine, like, oh, when I'm starting to feel stomach upset, that might be a warning that I'm being stressed. You might also react to different kinds of stress in different ways. So when you're dealing with the stress of parenting, you might notice a different list of symptoms than stress of a deadline at work or stress of doom scrolling about what's going on in the world. Okay. Let's nerd out for just a second on some terminology. So your nervous system sort of has two modes, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is what's kind of colloquially known as fight or flight, and you might also hear it referred to as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. All of those can be ways that you respond when your nervous system gets activated. And this is what happens when you might feel like your safety or survival are at risk, when your stress response starts to kick in, that adrenaline starts pumping, and it can strain your body systems when it's active for too long, when that adrenaline is constantly pumping because, you're trying to do the work of 5 people and you're just always feeling that drumbeat of pressure. It can start to take a toll. On the other side is parasympathetic, which you might also hear referred to as rest and digest. So this is when that adrenaline level comes back down to normal. And this is when your body systems start to work as they're ideally designed to. So if your heart rate is elevated, when your breathing is short and shallow, when your digestion feels like it's not working right during fight or flight, when we get back into parasympathetic, you're feeling safe and relaxed and things start to work as ideally they should. Now, one of the things we notice particularly in our work culture, is that we may have been trained to associate that sympathetic mode, that nervous system being keyed up, with motivation. If we aren't a little bit on edge, if we're even in fact relaxed, we might interpret that as, oh, I'm not motivated or I'm not ambitious. Have you ever said some version of, I do my best work under pressure? Well, there's a reason that we might find it difficult to start work when we don't have that deadline looming. That rush of adrenaline helps us act quickly without second guessing ourselves. That pressure can move us forward. But here's the danger. When you're in sympathetic mode, when that adrenaline is pumping, your brain is making decisions that are optimizing for your short-term survival. The part of your brain that makes long-term strategic decisions sort of takes a back seat so that your survival mode can focus on short-term getting out of that problem. So, for example, if you've ever heard these stories of like the mom who's able to lift the car up off of her kid and have like superhuman strength when her child is trapped, if in that moment you asked that mother, so what do you think your kid needs to really succeed in school and to feel safe and loved? Like, she would probably look at you like you're speaking a foreign language, because that part of her brain is offline while she focuses on the survival of her child. We don't have the ability to think abstractly or strategically or long term in that mode. So if you want to survive, that's a great thing. But if you want to be a good mate, a good coworker, a good manager, a good parent, a good child, maybe less so. So let me pause before we move into a few quick techniques and see if anyone has any questions. I'm just going to take a look at the chat. I see a couple of people who said their starting stress level was around a 6, or John, I appreciate your specificity of a 6.8. Let's see what we can do to maybe lower those a little bit as we practice a few of these techniques. So let's start with my sort of go-to when I'm stressed. It's easy, doesn't require a lot of focus on your technique. You can do this without people even really knowing that you're doing it. So what we'll do is we'll breathe in for a count of 4, we'll hold it at the top for 7, and exhale for a count of 8, and we'll do this together. That long exhale helps to tell our nervous system that we're safe. And interestingly, if you like to sing in the car or in the shower or just as you're puttering around the house, singing can have this same effect where we take a breath in and we're sort of slowly exhaling as we're singing. You may notice if you sing to yourself or sing in choir, you may have this same effect. So let's try this together. So we'll breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you're really stressed, it's really common that you might have sort of fast, shallow breathing. And you may notice that the first cycle or two that you do this, you run out of breath before you get to the 8. And so I invite you, if you're doing this, to calm yourself down. Focus on just sipping that breath out. And it's okay if it takes you until the second or third or fourth time through to still have enough breath left to get to the 8. You can close your eyes when you do this. Sometimes that can sort of shut out some of what's stressing you and let you just focus on your breath. But if you're doing this while you're driving, if you're doing this while you're in a meeting, absolutely not required. It's just an option if you find it helpful to relax a little bit further. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This is another variation on deep breathing. So what we're going to do is put your finger on one nostril, and I'll immediately sound like I have a cold, but we'll breathe in and fully exhale. And then use your finger to press the other nostril closed and breathe in and breathe out. This one's a little harder when it's allergy season, obviously. And you can combine this with 4, 7, 8 if you like, and do, breathe in for 4, hold, breathe out, and then switch nostrils. All of these you can sort of put together if you like to do that. This is a technique that comes to us from yoga. That's the tradition where we borrow this. Again, it helps to signal to our nervous system that we're safe. And so that stress level can relax our nervous system, can calm so that we can move into parasympathetic mode. I just learned this one recently, and it can actually be really fun to do with kids. They find it enjoyable. So you take a nice big deep breath in and zzz, zzz, zzz. As you exhale, it's silly. This one you probably don't want to do in a meeting. So my understanding of what this is doing is it helps to create vibration in the vagus nerve, which then helps to send the signal again to the nervous system that you're safe. Related humming and singing may also do this same thing, but it won't be as fun to do with your kids. So let's try and do this together. We'll breathe in and zzz, zzz, zzz. And as you're doing it, notice if if you move your tongue a different way or move, it really exaggerate that buzz if you feel that vibration differently. And you could combine this with 4-7-8 if you wanted to do that and sort of combine techniques. This is one of my favorites to teach coaching clients. This is called bilateral stimulation. And I'm going to shove back a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm grabbing my water bottle. So it works with a pen, a cup, a notebook. I recommend you not use your phone because if it starts going off while you're doing the exercise, it can take you out of it. But anything that won't vibrate, you sort of put it out to your side until it goes just out of your peripheral vision, and then bring it back to center, take it all the way over to the other side, and just continue to pass back and forth. Okay, super easy. I've also taught people to do this with a pen or a piece of candy under the table while they're in meetings, so it doesn't have to be up at line of sight. It can sort of happen under here, and if you're kind of stealthy about it, your shoulders don't even have to move. Part of what this does is when we are stressed, when our nervous system is activated, it tends to activate one side of our brain more than the other. And so in doing something that activates both sides of our body physically, it can get both hemispheres of our brain working. So I've heard people say that running or dancing can similarly give you some of this benefit because it's rhythmically moving both sides of your body and helping to dissipate that sort of electrical charge that's heavier on one side of your brain than on the other. This is another one that's super stealthy and great. So I've taught some of my clients to do this like at the Thanksgiving dinner table. If you're feeling stressed by your family, no one will ever know. So what we're going to do is look forward softly at any object, right? So if you're looking forward right now, you don't want to stare intently and study your webcam or whatever's on the wall in front of you. We're just sort of letting our eye come gently to rest at what's in front of us. And then slowly expand your visual awareness of the rest of the room until it sort of hits the edges of your peripheral vision. So for me, that's right about here. And then just imagine that your vision is able to expand all the way around behind your head. And now we're not doing this like a lighthouse or an owl where you're rotating. We're just imagining that that vision could sort of swoop all the way around and take in the entire room. Why does this work? You may notice when you're stressed that your vision comes down to just this sort of tunnel vision in front of you. This is an evolutionary advantage that if something is threatening you, you don't want to be wondering what's going on over there. You want to really be paying attention to that saber-toothed tiger and not letting anything distract you from the threat. So what we're doing by expanding that vision outward is we're sort of reverse engineering the sense of, no, thank you very much, nervous system. We don't need to be tunneled in. We're safe. Everything's okay here. You can relax. We can go back into parasympathetic mode. And as we practice a few of these, even very briefly, do you notice that maybe that starting point might have reduced a little? And I'm curious, I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone had a favorite of any of these, any that felt like, yeah, I could picture actually using that. That felt good. Now, if you know that there's a situation that's stressful for you, you know that going into have that one-on-one meeting with your boss to talk about getting a raise, or you know that having to go home for the holidays and deal with your in-laws is going to be stressful, you can use these techniques preventively too. So if you start out at a 2 or 3 and go into that stressful situation, you're going to have more margin to deal with it than if you walk in and you're already at a 7 or 8. So you can use these both when you're already stressed and when you know that things cause you to feel some stress going in. And so I see the breathing exercises felt the most calming. Allison liked the 4-7-8 breathing, me too. John liked breathing and bilateral stimulation. And again, like after you've practiced a few of these, if you like to piece them together and do nice, long, slow 4-7-8 breathing while you're doing bilateral stimulation, you can combine. You can also add in with the deep breathing what's called havening. So when I first learned about this, would have thought that hugging yourself would be like tickling yourself. Like, no, you can't do that. But your brain really responds to sort of stroking or squeezing your upper arms. So it can be very soothing to do the deep breathing or your B breaths while you're either squeezing or stroking your arms and giving your nervous system another sense that we're safe. We can take it down from a 7 or 8 even to a 6 or a 5, just a little bit back down. And importantly, none of what we're talking about is sort of trying to make it okay for you to put up with bad situations. This is not trying to gaslight you into your boss is a tyrant and you should just stay there by doing B breaths. Instead, by putting yourself a little bit farther down on that stress response by regulating your nervous system. If you regain your ability to think strategically and long term, you can be more thoughtful about how you'd like to respond to that stressful situation. Your ability to do problem solving will be greater instead of being in this revved up short-term thinking mode. Okay, so I also think it's really helpful as you're noticing, where am I on that scale of 1 to 10, to learn to recognize what are those first early warning signs that I'm feeling stress. Notice, is it always my heart rate? Is it my throat clenches up a little bit? Do I notice the back of my neck gets hot? Everybody has a different tell. And as you get skilled in using these tools, you might be able to do some nervous system regulation at that sort of first early warning sign. You know, it's sort of like, what's the thing that tells you you're getting a cold? For me, it's I get a scratchy throat at night, and no amount of drinking water will make the scratchy throat go away. We're looking for whatever your emotional equivalent is. And one of the things I work with my coaching clients on is noticing that when that emotion comes, if you don't fuel it, if you don't stay caught in the story of actively staying mad, how quickly can you help that dissipate? You know, for a lot of us, a big emotion, like someone cuts you off in traffic, it's very intense. And you'll notice that within 3 minutes, 5 minutes, your nervous system is sort of back at normal, steady state. So start to notice what your arc looks like. And if you do some of these nervous system techniques, like, can you smooth out that spike? Goes from this to maybe this. Here's what doesn't help, although it might feel great at the time. So venting can feel like a release. But what's insidious about it is that it keeps you in sympathetic mode rather than calming your emotional response. So it keeps you activated. And then there can be this circular logic where something upsets you. So you vent to a friend or a colleague and you stay upset. And then while you're in that state of staying upset, you think of even more things that upset you. So this is part of what your nervous system is doing. It's scanning for threats. So we're activated. And so now I'm going to be even more attuned to the other things that are threats to me. So I'll vent about those. It keeps you at that heightened state. This is not to say you should never commiserate with a friend or a colleague or check in to see if you're justified in being angry. But just notice what happens to your nervous system when you do that compared to if you might emotion serve and let it pass, or do one of the calming exercises instead of venting and staying in that emotional experience of what ticked you off. Snapping at others is similar. So let's say that somebody's done something to tick you off. So you react while you're in sympathetic mode. it's very possible that you kick off their fight or flight response, and now you keep each other riled up. And there's also a hazard that your nervous system doesn't differentiate once it's activated. So if you're stressed about work, you might come home and snap at your kids. Or if you had a stressful commute, you might snap at your colleagues because you're already at that 7 or 8, and it doesn't take much to send you the rest of the way. So when you're feeling activated about one thing and you're at greater risk of reacting to that next thing, the alternative is giving yourself some greater capacity by hopefully regulating from the first thing so you have more capacity to deal with coworkers and kids. Okay. Pause here again to ask for any questions. Just checking the chat. Anyone? Okay. So let me run through a couple of ways to build your capacity in the first place to deal with stress in your environment. And I'll do this with a couple of caveats. So if you feel like you might benefit with some support on stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, anything like that, it's really worth seeking out a good therapist. I think of all of these techniques that we're talking about as the sort of brushing and flossing that you do on a daily basis. They're the maintenance that you can do on your own that are not a substitute for seeing a dentist, right? So we want to do what we can on a daily basis to have the sort of prevention that keeps us at a lower place on our baseline. And why does that matter? So if you think about when you've had a great day and someone cuts you off in traffic, you might be annoyed, but in a couple minutes, you might barely remember that it happened. If you've had a challenging, stressful day and someone cuts you off, you might be more volatile. You might be quicker to react more intensely. So when we start out by taking better care of ourselves so that we have more capacity, life's going to throw things at us, and it's going to hopefully help us deal with those things that come up. Okay. So let's move into some prevention. So here are some basics. I resisted meditation for the longest time because I sort of felt like, who has time to sit for however long and not do anything when the thing that's stressing me out is my to-do list that I'm not getting through? I am a convert. I love the Headspace app. I find it really helpful as someone who had difficulty sitting still and finding that peace of 15 or 20 minutes of sitting. Meditation can help us build those skills of noticing that when we're having a thought, we can let it go. We don't have to engage with it. We can just notice it, allow it, and let it pass. One of the things that can keep us stressed is sort of ruminating on an endless loop and kind of continually recalling the thing that's stressing us. And it often isn't adding anything productive to the problem solving. It's just staying in the thought loop. Meditation can help us learn the practice to let that go. With gratitude journaling, there is so much data about the benefits of writing down 3 or 5 things that you're grateful for every day, our brains overemphasize what's negative. It's a survival benefit to notice what's threatening us. But so gratitude journaling can sort of even out the scale and put some more positive on that scale against our noticing what's negative. Dance breaks are super fun. It's a chance to do some of that bilateral movement. There's also data that shows that dancing is a movement that helps you learn, and that moving rhythmically activates parts of your brain that don't light up with other kinds of physical activities. Morning walks, again, it's a bilateral way of moving. You're going to get some light in your eyes, which helps to reset your circadian rhythm. This is a habit that my husband and I have had for 20 years, maybe more. It's really beneficial in helping to regulate your circadian rhythm. And also notice what helps keep you calmer. If it's a weekly phone call to your best friend, if it's working with your favorite music on, notice what helps you build your capacity, what makes you feel good. This is a really helpful sort of mnemonic device to remember we're going to be quicker to snap when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So paying attention to keeping each of these areas tended can give us a little bit more capacity to deal with stress. It sounds a little patronizing to say, remember to eat, but so often I talk to clients or friends who get to the end of the day irritable, exhausted, depleted, and then they realize, oh yeah, I never ate lunch. So that could be that you're so busy that you never feel like there's a good moment to step away from your computer. But also remember that when you're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state, it affects our body systems. So you may not notice that normal hunger cue until you're really crashing and you're hangry. So for me, one of the things I have to do when I notice that I'm in a stressful phase is I keep snacks on hand that even like my irritable, stressed tummy can always handle. So that might be toast with butter. Like I can almost always do macaroni and cheese. Like that's my secret weapon when I'm stressed. When you're angry, any of those nervous system techniques that we practice together can be good to soothe that anger. Again, the caveat, just because we're trying to calm down our anger doesn't mean you have to put up with what's making you angry, but it will help you, go have a difficult conversation in a way that hopefully is going to be way more productive than if you just shout. Here's another thing that can be helpful. So often when we're angry, it's maybe less about the neutral circumstances of what happened. It's about the story that we're telling ourselves about what happened. And we've made up some details to fill in some blanks. We've made assumptions. We've jumped to conclusions. And so the author, Byron Katie, explains in a process called the work, these 4 questions that can help us just take a step back and get curious about those assumptions, about the story that we're telling ourselves. And so those questions are, is it true? Can you absolutely know it's true? What proof do you have? What are the facts, the provable facts? How do you react when you believe that thought? And who would you be without that thought? Who would you be if you let that story or those assumptions or those beliefs go? So let's say you're angry because of how a colleague treated you in a meeting. You are angry because they didn't respect you. With these 4 questions, maybe you'd stop and ask, is it true that they don't respect me? Can I absolutely know that that's true? Have I asked? Or have they said that directly to me? Or am I inferring? How do I react when I believe that thought? Well, for me, when I feel disrespected, I might get defensive, or it might kick up my imposter syndrome and get me wondering, well, maybe they're right to disrespect me. Maybe I'm not very good at this. And who would I be without the thought? Like, maybe I'd be someone who would notice, they have been acting a little strange in other circumstances as well. Oh, yeah, they've been snapping at other people because they have a toddler at home and maybe they're just sleep deprived. Maybe it's not about me at all. So asking these questions can give us just like a little bit of arm's reach to maybe notice how much of it is facts and how much of it is story. If you feel lonely, you are not alone. The US Surgeon General put out a report called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And that didn't come out in 2020 during lockdown. It came out in 2023. In our busy modern lives, where we often live far from our extended families, maybe we spend all our waking hours with more to-dos than we can handle. Maybe we have a long commute. We can start to feel isolated. A few simple suggestions. You may find others work for you. Make a quick outreach. It's amazing. There's data that show that even just taking that moment to send a text to someone you love can actually make a difference in our sense of connection. Schedule a meetup with someone you enjoy and stick to it. So when we're stressed, there can be a strong temptation to withdraw and cocoon, or to feel too overwhelmed and to want to cancel. You may need to do some of those deep breaths. You may need to do your bilateral stimulation and remind yourself, I need this connection. When we're feeling lonely, because we're pack animals, it's one of the things that can start to activate our nervous system. And so we can start to retreat. If you can combine social time with other activities, get a friend to go to the gym with you, get a friend to go run errands with you, then maybe it doesn't just become another to do on your list to like, when am I supposed to find time to go to brunch? And you combine. And just a note that, all manner of things about modern life, whether that's getting your groceries delivered, getting food delivered, shopping online, can be super convenient. And then pretty soon you're living a life of a hermit. Sometimes we need to take that effort to do the thing that's less convenient so that you don't feel as isolated. Sleep deprivation is massively common these days. And years ago, I read this article quoting a relationship therapist who would not take on new couples until both people committed to getting adequate sleep every night. Because when we're tired, we are less able to regulate our emotions. We are like a cranky toddler when we're sleep deprived. So a couple of suggestions. I know you may be busy and it's hard to find that 8 hours, but if you take that morning walk to regulate your circadian rhythm, watch caffeine and alcohol. They can both really mess with your ability to get to sleep and get good sleep. Create a bedtime ritual that signals to your body that it's going to be time to wind down. So turn down the lights. I always brush my teeth and then I wash my face and then I read in bed for a while. It all, it's hard to just like, our body is not a light switch that just switches off. A really hard one for a lot of people can be getting off screens for an hour before bed, but both the blue light and what you're consuming can really rile you up and keep you awake. And so then it's hard to have your body drift gently off to sleep. And then one of my favorites is to try and slow your thoughts. So if you find that you're laying awake at night and you're like replaying that meeting or replaying that fight you had with your spouse or replaying what your kids did, instead of trying to force sleep or instead of trying to say like, oh, I need to stop thinking about that, just put space between the words. And part of what this does is it takes some of the wind out of the sails of those stressful thoughts, which can help you calm down enough to get to sleep. By the way, that technique of slowing down thoughts instead of trying to change thoughts can be helpful during the day. I especially find it helpful at night when I'm trying to fall asleep and my brain just won't shut off. So we're almost at the top of the hour. Want to save a few minutes here before we wrap up and ask if there are any questions from anyone. You can drop them in the chat if you like. And while we're taking that moment, I'll see if anybody has a question. A final note, like we often talk about self-care, like it's just your job to take care of you and everyone else's job to take care of themselves. But if you take this effort to regulate your nervous system and to lower your stress level, it can be like an inoculation that keeps your stress level from spreading. So it's not just self-care, it's a way to care for your colleagues, your friends, your family. It's being kind to yourself, but it's also being kind to everybody who's in your orbit. And Gabriella, I see the question. Are you able to send us the PowerPoint? You will get the recording, and I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint as well if you'd like that. Oh, great question. When did you become a meditation convert and how long did it take? I am by nature a restless person. And so I felt like because I was restless, I was doing meditation wrong. And a friend of ours pointed out it's called a meditation practice for a reason. Like we continue to practice and we don't need to worry about getting perfect at it. I think I committed to 3 months of just like, I'm going to sit down for 10 minutes every morning and try this. And for me, using a guided meditation is way easier than just like setting your egg timer and trying to be quiet for 10 minutes. It helps to like bring me back to what I'm supposed to be doing. Headspace is one. There are a lot of other ones as well. You can also find lots of guided meditations on YouTube. There's one that I really like. That's a loving kindness meditation. So lots of different options if you don't initially vibe with the first one you try.
Thank you.
I think we're right at 7 p.m. Eastern on the dot. So if there are no other questions, then I think I'll hand it back over to you to wrap us up.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Colleen. I personally found that I liked the combination of like the vocabulary. Like I guess I'm an engineering graduate, but the nerding out a little bit, and knowing some of the rationale behind some of those techniques, I thought was great. So thank you so much. I thought this was a great presentation. And as Colleen said, this is still recording. I haven't stopped the recording yet, but I'll send out a link. And then if you do want to share the slides as well, we can make sure that's included as well. Just one last note for me. Thank you again for attending. In the chat, I just put a link to our club website. And I'll just share real quick for those that are more local to Ann Arbor. Let's see if I have it up here. Some of our upcoming events are this upcoming Sunday. The weather is turned a little bit, but we have a visit to an orchard and cider mill. The registration for that is full, but typically if you reach out to Rudra Mehta, he's the lead, you probably could still attend because we'll probably, if the weather does get a little rainy, we'll probably have some drop-offs and stuff. We have a watch party at Holmes campus up off of Jackson Road for the Michigan State game. John, Colleen's husband, who's also in the call today, is hosting a cocktail class also in November. That one is full as well, but there is a wait list option. So if anybody drops off, you could still add yourself to the wait list for that. And then we have the Northwestern game watch party as well that same weekend. And then our email should come out this week, and we have a work day at Matai Botanical Gardens. If anybody's interested in that, the registration is already available. Anything you see on this page, you can already register for. And then there's some longer things that, again, maybe haven't not been publicized yet in our newsletters, but you can always find if you come to this page and look at more events, what's going on. So just something to keep in mind for that. So again, thank you, Colleen. Thank you to everybody that attended, local and far away. That's great. And also, if you want to let us know if there's other topics like this, if you enjoyed this, we're certainly open to having future sessions on similar lifelong learning or career or other topics as well. So appreciate that feedback as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks again for attending.
Thanks so much, everyone.